Not every so-called muscle car could move so quickly like we imagined. While some of them were slow when new, they became excellent tuner cars. Here are the fast-looking muscle cars that are slowish. Starting with number 10, we have the Triumph Stag. Put a V8 engine in a respectable 6-cylinder sports car and watch as everything falls apart at the wheels. How about this? Since Buick and Rover V8s were readily accessible, most people would erroneously think that they were just installed in this automobile. Nevertheless, it was unfortunate that these folks attempted to create their own engine. With a total displacement of 3.0 liters, the engine was composed of 2 of its 4-cylinder assemblies formed into one block. The business ought to have just upgraded its 2.5-liter i6 instead of complicating things with a half-liter greater displacement. Keep in mind that this is a British vehicle, therefore water and oil leaks were commonplace. Combine that with a suspect engine, and owning one becomes a nightmare. They had the opportunity to act, but they chose not to. At number 9, we have the 1965 Rambler Marlin. It had the appearance of a bullet train. It was not meant to be a muscle vehicle though, and it was only manufactured for 2 years. Demand caused it to sort of change into that, and by the 1967 model year, a robust 343 was on the market. Being a unibody, the automobile was light. The goal for the first year was to appear better than the Valiant Barracuda, and it succeeded really well in that regard. However, because their love for the Valiant served as the inspiration for the design, they also gave the vehicle an engine that was proportioned similarly to the first-generation Valiant Barracuda, which was likewise not very powerful. The vehicle was really a private luxury vehicle with a muscle car aesthetic. The majority of the other automobiles in this article would still be smoke-filled by the first-generation 327-powered option though. Now at number 8, we have the 1964 Valiant Barracuda. It seemed quick, but it was only in the middle of the pack because it wasn't customized yet. It wasn't a hot rod, but it was sporty with a 273 V8 and a 4-speed. A year later, the hot engines arrived, with a 230 horsepower 273. The highest choice this year was a less powerful 180 horsepower V8, but the car was still lightweight, so it wasn't a terrible bargain. It was not the road burner that it appeared to be. An automobile built on a standard budget model chassis became a true showstopper thanks to the style. Similar to the Rambler, this car's chrome accent truly brought the look to life. The engines on later Barracudas were incredibly quick. At number 7, we have the Mustang II King Cobra. Though it only had 130 horsepower, this automobile really looked the part. It had a 5-liter V8 that was modified down to comply with the era's emissions regulations, despite having several louvers, tape stripes, T-tops, and stylish wheels. It wasn't sluggish because it wasn't built on the lightweight Pinto. It was just slower than it appeared. Though the majority of people despised them, these vehicles were really a step forward from the overweight Mustang Grande, which was basically a very large pony car. The two lacked a powerful engine, but at least it handled nicely. For the time, the build quality was respectable. Its condition of tune ought to have been different. Coming in at number 6, we have the 1982-84 Camaro Z28. Although the third-generation Camaros were well-liked, they were poorly constructed vehicles. In many aspects, the car's first year was lacking. In an automobile weighing 3,600 pounds, the maximum engine output was limited to 165 horsepower. Before GM introduced tuned port injection, the pokey engines were retained into the 1985 model year. During the first year of this model, the customer had to settle with respectable handling but sufficient power. Though not extremely stiff and prone to squeaking during sharp bends, the body was respectable for the period. The WS6 package rear discs were not available from the brakes for this year either. At number 5, we have the Volare Roadrunner. Simple, elegant family automobiles were what these were. Chrysler couldn't afford to recast more emissions-friendly cylinder heads, so their engines were still producing decent power in the form of a general-purpose engine used in all of their vehicles. This is why the 318 2V wasn't as wonky as the Ford 302 and Chevy 305 engines, in addition to being slightly bigger. Although they weren't very good, these autos were in a calm state of tune when they arrived. With the option to have deck stripes and spoilers together with a somewhat cushioned vinyl top, they did appear somewhat ridiculous. Rather from the 2 series axle ratio that some pony cars received, which turned those cars into turtles, the rear axles were just the low 3 series axle ratio for general purpose use. Now at number 4, we have the 1979 Mercury Capri RS. At least these automobiles got it right. A turbo 4-cylinder engine rather than a detuned V8 should be used in a pony car if the engine is only going to produce 1,118 horsepower. The extra 250 pounds, why carry it on the front? Because it was essentially an upgrade Mustang, the car handled better and had almost the same amount of power as the V8 Mustang from the same era, but it also had a quicker appearance. The RS was the model for the classic Mustang SVO. It was simply a touch less polished and had less power because it was released in 1979 as opposed to the 1985 release of the SVO. Despite being poorly constructed, the Fox-bodied automobiles were highly appreciated. The initial Ford turbo vehicle was this one. By 1984, Ford increased the boost to 175 horsepower in the RS, although this model was far slower. At number 3, we have the 57 Bel Air. One of the most stylish and iconic pieces ever are these. Never mind, relatively few of the 283 horsepower top options were really produced. Those are quite uncommon. Really, the majority of them had engines ranging from 130 to 200 horsepower in large, heavy vehicles with tons of steel. Today's standards would render even the 283 fuel-injected model unresponsive and unmanageable. As far as being fast by today's standards goes, this was the first Chevy passenger automobile that could fit 4 or more passengers. The beauty of this creature is that even in motion it appears quick, even with its sluggish brakes and handling. This car at number 2 is something you need to look out for, because I can't believe this particular car is not fast. We have the Opel GT Coupe. This tale has a lot of curiosity. A German-based GM brand available at Buick dealerships in the US. Although it only featured a 1.9-liter OHC engine and a 5-speed transmission as an option, this automobile had the appearance of a little Mako Shark Corvette. Being more of a sports car than a muscle car, it was built with the option of a mid-engined, high-performance drivetrain in mind. This is because the rear trunk area is boxed and welded to accommodate an engine similar to a Porsche. But GM never followed through on it, sticking with the 90 horsepower engine as the sole available alternative. The vehicle wasn't a slug, it handled nicely, and it was just little over a ton. It was simply slow. Very few of the early models, which had a 1.1-liter capacity and 67 horsepower, were sold. Finally, at number 1, we have the first-generation VW GTI Golf. When it was new, the automobile was marketed as a little muscle car. During that day, the radio commercials sang a German translation of Ronnie and the Daytonas, Little GTO, which they named Little GTI instead. Although its power was more than double that of the diesel and far more than that of the regular Rabbit, its horsepower was still just 110. With its 1.6-liter engine, the automobile was not a rocket, but it was very swift considering its weight of barely 1,800 pounds. Even then, compared to other automobiles of its era, it possessed a significantly superior power-to-weight ratio. Since they didn't require a fifth gear, the early ones didn't even bother to have one. Thank you for watching and don't forget to hit the subscribe button.